Hi everyone. Today the topic I would like to discuss is basics of seismology. In this main topic there are three subtopics: the history of seismology and the elasticity theory and the types and nature of the seismic waves which were generated during an earthquake. So to make the video shorter, I would like to cover the first two topics only. The other third topic I would like to discuss in another video. So let's coming to the topic. So the seismology is nothing but a scientific study of earthquakes. Earthquake, as you all know, a sudden release of energy which has been accumulated along the fault planes for several years within the earth. So whenever there is an earthquake happen, obviously there must be an instrument to record the earthquake, uh, to know where it has been occurred and what is the intensity of an earthquake. So that instrument is called as a seismograph, which was invented by John Milne in 1982. Nowadays that instrument is called as a seismometers. So the main understanding of this subject, seismology, has come into the limelight only after the greatest earthquake happened in San Francisco in 1906. And also the study of the seismology helps us to find out the internal structure of the earth, which I have discussed earlier in my earlier video. And also whenever there is an earthquake occurred, the seismic waves released, the energy has been released in the form of seismic waves. So the seismic wave propagation has been decided by whatever the material through which they have been propagated and the density of those materials. So to find out the nature of the materials which were existed within the earth, so the elasticity theory which has to be understood. So that's why I would like to start with the elasticity theory before going into the seismology concept. So as you all know, these are the two basic definitions. The stress is nothing but a force per unit area. Strain is the change in the either the dimension of a body or the position of a body after applying the stress. Coming to the stress, there are mainly two types of stress we need to be discussed. Those are longitudinal stress, means the direction of the stress is always perpendicular to the surface area on which the stress has been applied. And it is also called as a normal stress. And if the direction changes from normal to along the surface, that stress is called as a shear stress, means the direction of the stress is along the surface plane, that is called as a shear stress. Correspondingly, if there is a stress, obviously there will be a strain. So for longitudinal stress, if there is a strain, that is called as a longitudinal strain. And for a shear stress, there is a shear strain. But the longitudinal strain corresponds to the change in the dimension of the body, either in length or height, width, or whatever it is, the volume of the body changes. So the longitudinal strain corresponds to the dimension of the body. But the shear strain corresponds to the position of a body, means whenever there is a change in the position, means the angle, if the angle of a body changes earlier before the applying the stress, whatever it is, it might be the position, if it changes after applying the stress, so that type of change is called as a shear strains. Here you can see one more strain is also there, that is lateral strain. Let us assume a 3D body, and if we apply longitudinal stress outward on a one surface of the 3D body, so obviously there will be extension in the same direction the stress has been applied. So correspondingly, if there is an extension in one direction, to compensate that strain, there will be a contraction in the other two directions also. So that type of strain the contraction which has been occurred due to the longitudinal stress, it is called as a lateral strain, and it is always proportional to the longitudinal strain, and it is always opposite direction. If the longitudinal strain is extension, obviously the lateral strain is contraction. So the negative sign here indicates that the opposite direction of the lateral and longitudinal strains. Here comes the basic law, which relates the strain and stress of a body. The strain in a body which is always directly proportional to the stress, but with this law only valid for the perfectly elastic bodies only. So whatever the proportionality constant between stress and strain is we call as an elastic constants. For different stress and strains there are different elastic constants. Here you can see for longitudinal strain and longitudinal stress there is one constant, the proportionality constant is called as a Young's modulus. For shear strain and shear stress there is one more constant, it is called as rigidity modulus, or you can also call it as a shear modulus. There is one more constant, bulk modulus. You might have not heard about these two. This is also one type of stress and dilatation is also one type of strain, but I will explain what are those. Hydrostatic pressure means the stress direction is uniform in every direction possible. In every possible direction on a body is same, and it is always inward like this here. So in such cases there is no possibility for a shear components to exist. So only the longitudinal stress and longitudinal strain only exist in such cases. So whatever the strain resulted in such cases is the sum of the longitudinal strains which has been occurred in all the three directions. So the sum of the longitudinal strains is called as a dilatation. So this strain, the dilatation, is always directly proportional to the applied stress, that is hydrostatic pressure. So the constant here is the bulk modulus. Because the stress is always inward, the negative sign indicates the contraction. So apart from these elastic constant, there is one more parameter we need to discuss in elasticity theory, that is Poisson's ratio. As I have already discussed in the previous slide, the lateral strain, whatever the contraction which is compensation for the longitudinal strain, is always directly proportional to the longitudinal strain. So the proportionality constant here is the Poisson's ratio, and its value ranges between 0 and 0.5. You may ask when it becomes 0. It becomes 0 when there is no lateral strain, and it's not possible for whatever the rocks we have used to see, but it becomes 0.5 when there is a lateral strain. Is the value of the lateral strain is half of the longitudinal strains. For example, assume a fluid in a water bottle and compress it in one direction. Obviously there will be an expansion in other two directions. So whatever the strain is occurring in the applied direction is compensated by the other two directions, the strain which has been occurring in the other two directions. So obviously the sum of the lateral strains in other two directions is equal to the total longitudinal strains. In such cases the Poisson's ratio will becomes to 0.5. Hope you understood. There are mainly three types of materials. The first one is elastic. The elastic materials always obeys the Hooke's law. The stress and strain relationship is always linear. So if we remove the stress on the object, on elastic object, immediately it came back to its original shape like a rubber. So there is one more type, inelastic type. In this case also the stress and strain relationship is linear, but up to certain limit only. But if we cross that linear range, the strain is non-linear to the applied stress. Like here you can see the stress and strain relationship is non-linear here. So even after the removal of stress, the strain doesn't come back to its original position immediately. It takes some time, but it comes to its original position. So such type of material is called inelastic materials. There is one more type, plastic materials. So if we apply the stress beyond the elastic limit on any object, it not on any object, sorry. So if we apply the stress beyond a certain limit, there will be a permanent strain will be left in that material even you remove the stress. Such type of material is called as plastic materials. So in these three types of materials, every material has their own threshold values. If we cross the threshold values, it becomes failure, means the rock will break, obviously. So for example, the example for the elastic material is the crustal rocks. Those are very brittle, and even after applying even after applying very few amount of stress, it will break. Inelastic, for example, for the inelastic material is the mantle rocks. So let's coming to the elastic rebound theory. This is the theory which explained sorry. So this is the theory explains how the energy stored in the rocks, and how the energy will be released by an earthquakes. We all know that the crust is made up of the different plates which float on the astronosphere, which is the mantle, the fluid part of the upper mantle. And always the tectonic plate movement is not free, and the plane along which the tectonic plates slide each other is called as a fault plane. And there is a friction exists along this fault plane, and this results in the building up of the stress, building up of stress, and which accumulates further with the time until it exceeds the local rock strength. And once it exceeds the strength of the local rocks, it releases its energy, whatever it has been accumulated for several years, in the form of heat and seismic waves. So that release of energy causes the disturbance, and that we call it as an earthquake. So this theory mainly provides a model for the scientists to predict the probability and severity of an upcoming earthquake of any region. So well, the fault planes exist not only at the only tectonic plate boundaries, we can observe them in the local rock beds also. Those are mainly three types I would like to discuss here. The first one is normal fault. Here you can see this is the fault plane between the two rock beds. Let's assume the one person is moving from down to up along this slope. So the where his foot will be, his foot on the this rock bed. So this is called as a footwell. Means to understand simply, I am explaining this. So if a person is moving from up to down, so on which rock bed his foot will be, so that rock bed is called as a foot wall, and opposite to that wall is opposite to that rock bed, whatever it is called as a hanging wall. For suppose the same fault plane, if it is in the opposite direction like this, like in these directions, then it will become the foot wall and it will become the hanging wall. So why I am explaining this, whatever the fault we are discriminating here, these three types of faults on the basis of the moment of the foot wall and hanging wall only. So if the hanging wall is moving downward along, with respect to the foot wall, we cannot say certainly that which rock bed is moving, either foot wall or hanging wall, but uh, for for simple explanation, we used to consider the foot wall is at rest and the hanging wall is moving. So if the hanging wall is moving downward with respect to the foot wall, such fault is called as a normal fault. But if this direction reverse, means if the hanging wall is moving upward over the foot wall with respect to the foot wall, that fault is called as a reverse fault. There is one more fault here. If the two here there is no here footwall and hanging wall are moving against each other. So the direction of the movement is uh, along the strike here, along the strike of the fault plane here. So this type of fault is called as a strike slip fault. So here you can see this is the fault plane. So the point here it is representing as a focus, means the energy is released here along the fault plane. So here the whatever the energy has been accumulated, which has been which released suddenly here, so that point is called as a focus that we cannot see. So if we project the same point on the earth surface, the vertical projection of the focus on the earth surface is called as a epicenter. So this is very important. The finding an epicenter for an earthquake is very crucial part in the earthquake studies. So once this energy is released as a seismic waves, so how these waves will be propagated within the earth, within the different layers of the earth, and how many types of waves can be generated by an earthquakes, and what is their nature. So all these topics I would like to discuss in another video. Thank you.